Chapter 25 of Ramayana's Ayodhya Kanda. Sumantra returns to Ayodhya. Apadamahartaram dhataram sarvasampadam lokabhiramam Shriramam bhuyo bhuyo namamyaham. After the departure of Rama, Guha and Sumantra stood on the banks of the river Ganga for a long time, conversing on the tragic events which had taken place with so much suddenness. Guha heard from his men about Rama's proceeding to the ashrama of Bharadwaja and of his going to the mountain by name Chitrakuta, where he had decided to stay. Sumantra took leave of Guha, and after yoking the horses to the chariot, he turned his face towards Ayodhya. He travelled fast, and it took him 3 days to reach the city. Evening had set in when he reached Ayodhya, and as he had imagined, there was no activity to be seen in the streets. The city seemed to have been sick and gone to sleep out of exhaustion. So silent were the streets, empty as they were of men. There was a silence which was very frightening, and Sumantra entered the city gates, and someone heard the chariot. The street was soon filled with men and women and children who rushed towards Sumantra, asking him, "Where is Rama? Have you not brought him with you?" "No," said Sumantra. "I left him on the banks of the Ganga, and I have been sent back by him." Without speaking to anyone, with a downcast face, Sumantra drove fast towards the palace of the king. He descended at the doorstep and entered the glorious mansion. The women saw him enter, and they knew that he had left Rama in the forest. Tears welled up in their eyes. Sumantra went to the chambers where the king was, and he entered it. He saw the king, approached him, and after prostrating before him, he stood silent. Dasharatha looked at him, and his eyes were questioning. Sumantra recounted to him everything about Rama in detail, and he ended the recital with the scene when he had to leave them on the banks of the river Ganga. He had to stop since the king had fainted. Kausalya and Sumitra raised up the sorrowing king and tried to make him regain consciousness. Sumantra looked at the king. 3 days had made it impossible to recognize him. Dasharatha was changed. He was a picture of woe and repentance, and every sigh which escaped his lips seemed to shatter his entire frame. It was a pathetic sight to see the king grieve thus for his son. He turned his lusterless eyes on Sumantra and asked him, "Tell me once again how my son walked all the way to the forest. How did he sleep? How could he bear the hardness of the ground? Did Rama send me any message? What did Lakshmana say and Sita? Talk to me about Rama, and I may find a semblance of peace, of comfort from your words." Sumantra gave Rama's message to the king and added, "The prince Lakshmana, however, was angry. He said, 'What was the fault which the king found in my brother that he should have banished him to the Dandaka forest?' The king decided to please Kaikeyi Devi, and as a result, we have been made to suffer. Because of this unjust behavior of the king, I refuse to think of him as my father. Rama is my father, master, brother, and the God whom I worship. Rama was dear to everyone. He is righteous, and by sending him to the forest, the king has alienated everyone from himself. How will he command respect as a king from now on?" Sita was looking dazed and stood silent. She never spoke a word, but stood looking at her husband. Rama had tears in his eyes when I bade farewell to him, and Sita too looked at me with her eyes filled with tears. They crossed the river Ganga in a boat, which Guha placed at their disposal, and I stood on the banks of the river, watching the boat until they landed on the southern bank. Before they went in the boat, the princes, who were already dressed in Valkalas, asked Guha for the milk of the Nyogrodha and Even as I was watching, they matted their hairs into a tangled mass, and they looked like young rishis. When they had landed on the other bank, Lakshmana walked first and Sita went after him. Rama walked behind her, and thus, in a single file, they walked away, and I watched until I could see them no more. I yoked the horses to the chariot and hurried to your presence, my lord. When I entered the city Ayodhya, there was dismay. I was not welcomed by anyone since I was the one who took Rama away from the city. The king was listening and he spoke nothing for a while. His mind was lost in thoughts of his son, and he imagined the picture which Sumantra had presented to him so vividly. He spoke at last in a faltering voice. This greatest of all calamities has befallen the house of the noblest kings because of me and my thoughtlessness. Sumantra, take me to Rama. I cannot leave without Rama. Dasharatha was beside himself with grief, and Kausalya sat with tears coursing down her cheeks. She spoke not a word, and so they sat, the old king and his wives, Sumitra and Kausalya, the bereaved mothers. After some time, Dasharatha turned his eyes on Kausalya and said, Kausalya, I ask you to forgive me. I fold my palms thus and ask you again and again to forgive me for this my unjust action. You have always been just, kind, and good even to your enemies. You are generous at heart. Do not be angry with me. I am suffering already, and do not add to my misery by your displeasure. Kausalya was shocked by the words of the king. She spoke to him in a kind and gentle voice and said, Do not do this, my lord. A husband should never ask his wife for forgiveness. It is wrong. A woman whose husband does so will be unfit for the next world. I am familiar with the rules of the conduct, and if I have said anything to hurt you, it is because of my sorrow at the separation from my child. You know, my lord, sorrow kills one's courage. It destroys the power to think properly. There is no enemy worse than sorrow, since it has the power to annihilate all one's good qualities. When your enemies hurt you, you can fight back. But when the gods will that certain events should take place, we are helpless and we cannot alter the course of fate. 5 days have passed since our child left us and went away, and already it seems like 5 years. And thoughts of him only make sorrow increase more and more, and it grows tenfold in the heart. The sun's rays had lost their heat, and they were being slowly withdrawn. The sun was setting, and soon night set in. Out of sheer exhaustion, King Dasharatha slept for some time. After a while he woke up. Kausalya was there by his side. It was a tragic sight. The two old people sitting and talking about their son and crying again and again. Sumitra could not comfort them. Dasharatha was thinking back on the glorious life he had led and about this sad end to it. He was certain in his mind that he would not live after this calamity which had visited him. As he looked back on his eventful life, he was able to remember something which had happened when he was a young man. He looked at Kausalya for a long moment. His eyes were sad and tender. He decided to tell her about it. Jai Shri Ram. Shri Rama Rama Rame Tirame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tattulyam Ramanama Varanane. Om Shri Ramar Panamast. Chapter 26 of Ramayana's Ayodhya Kanda. The curse of a rishi. Apadamahartaram Dataram Sarvasampadam Lokabhiramam Shriramam Bhuyo Bhuyo Namamyaham. As Kausalya had mentioned, it was the 6th night after Rama had departed. Half the night had passed and the king was now wide awake. He called Kausalya and asked her to sit very close to him. He said, "My queen, when a man does something, whether it is good or bad, he is sure to reap the harvest of his act. A good act will grant him punya, while the wrong act will definitely make him suffer for it. If this is not realized, then man is foolish. An action performed with no thoughts of the consequences will, if it is wrong, make the man realize the truth about it, and by that time it is too late. He is unable to stem the tide of retribution, which is sure to follow a wrong act. I have to relate to you an incident which took place when I was a young prince. I had learnt a difficult trick in archery. I could, by listening to the sound made by an animal, kill it with an arrow aimed from a distance. This is called Shabdavedi, and I was very good at it. It was of great use to me during hunting, and I was quite proud of my achievement. It was the rainy season. Then sun had burnt the earth with his fierce rays during summer, and the skies had now assumed a darkness because of the rain clouds. The noise made by the frogs was welcome, since it was an indication that rain would follow soon. I remember everything very clearly. The birds were drenched with the rain, which had begun to pour suddenly, and the trees were the only shelters they could find. The mountains were covered by the rainfall, and the earth looked like the sea. So full of water was it. Water was flowing from the mountains like snakes winding down its slopes. It was exciting to go out in the rain, and armed with my bow and arrows, I went to the banks of the Sarayu to hunt. I stood still, and to my ears came the noise made by the elephant drinking water with its trunk. Familiar as I was with Shabdavedi, I took up an arrow and shot it in the direction from which the noise came. A moment passed, and to my dismay, I heard the cry of a human being in pain. I heard someone say, "Why should I, an ascetic, be hunted like an animal? Who is this sinful man who has done me to death? Who is this shameless man? Who is he?" I rushed to the spot, and there I saw a young ascetic. His body was covered with dust and blood, and by his side was a pot from which water had flowed out. He looked at me and said, "Hey, Prince, and yet you have done something unforgivable. How have I offended you that you should punish me like this? I came to the river to take water for my old parents who are blind. They will be helpless without me. They will also die, since they cannot exist without me. They were thirsty, and so I came here to fetch water for them. They do not know that I am dying." He was getting tired, and I fell at his feet and told him about the mistake which had been committed by me. He could not be pacified, but after a while he said, "O Prince, go at once to my father and tell him about what you have done. This footpath leads to our ashrama, and if you go along this, you will reach him. Try and pacify him and avert a curse which he is likely to pronounce. Take this pot, fill it with water, and take it with you. And do me a favor. This arrow is hurting me abominably, and my life is ebbing away too slowly. Be kind and remove the arrow from the wound." I was hesitant, but he assured me that I would not be dogged by the sin of killing a Brahmin. I removed the arrow, and almost immediately he died. Like a sinner, I walked to the ashrama of the old people with a pot of water in my hands. I saw them, the old couple. They were sitting near the doorway waiting for their son. They heard my footsteps and said, "Have you brought water for us?" I did not know how to approach them. I stood still, and the old man said, "Why are you standing so far away? Come closer and give the pot of water. We cannot see you, and you know you are everything to us. Do not sport with us, but give the water. Your mother is very thirsty. Why are you so silent?" I plucked up enough courage to go near them. I said, "I am not your son. I am a prince by name Dasharatha. I belong to the race of the sun. I have unwittingly caused great pain for both of you. The act is not to be forgiven easily, and yet I beseech you to forgive me since I did not mean it. They were impatient to know what had happened, and I told them what I had done. The sound of the pot being filled, I said, seemed to me to be the noise made by the elephant while drinking water with his trunk, and I aimed with my arrow at the source of the sound. It was only when he cried out that I realized that I had hit a human being and that he was moaning in pain. I hurried to his presence and he told me who he was. I have killed your son. He has left you alone and helpless, and it was because of me. I stand here before you asking you to forgive me for my thoughtless action. For a moment they were speechless, and then the old man said, if you had not come of your own accord and told me, your head would have split into 1,000 fragments because of my anger. Be good enough to lead us to where our child lies. We would like to touch him. I led them to the spot where their son lay dead. It was painful to see them mourning him. The father performed the last rites for the son according to the Shastras. He offered water as a tarpana for the son. The father then turned to me and said, I am suffering extreme sorrow because of the separation from my son. I am now cursing you who has caused this suffering for us. Your death will also be similar to mine. You will die as a result of separation from your son. After cursing me, the old couple entered the fire. The king and queen were silent for a long time. Poor Kausalya was stunned when she heard the story. She had not known that such a curse had been pronounced on her lord. She held his hand firmly in hers and wept hot tears which fell on his hands and seemed to scorch him. Dasharatha said, Kausalya, this incident comes back to my mind now. The words of a Brahmin will never be untrue. I am sure I will die very soon. My eyes are no longer able to see you. Everything looks dark to me. Kausalya, touch me with your hands and comfort me with your presence. I cannot see you. He said musingly, what I did to Rama is a grave injustice, and it does not befit me and the name I have earned so long in this world. But Rama's attitude towards me is worthy of him. Which father will send away his son even if the son is ill-natured or even if he is a sinner? No father can treat his son as I have treated mine. My son's senses, Kausalya, are getting numb, and I am certain that the messengers of death have already been sent to fetch me. I am dying and my eyes are not able to have one last look at my beloved child. My life is draining away slowly from my body, and it is because my son is not with me. Those who will see Rama after 14 years will be fortunate. They will see his face charming like the moon, with eyes like lotus petals. Because of the sin I have committed knowingly, death is fast approaching me. I am not able to perceive anything with my senses. My eyes, my ears, my touch have all ceased to function. I can see that, one by one, they are being withdrawn into the departing breath, like a lamp which has no more oil to feed it. Rama, you are away from me at the moment when I need you most. Kausalya, my dear Sumitra, I have been deceived by Kaikeyi. She has proved to be my death. The king was mourning for a long time. Often the name of Rama would escape his lips. The queens were beside him on the couch, and they were exhausted too, and leaning against the couch, they slept the sleep of exhaustion. Jai Shri Ram. Shri Rama Rama Rame Tirame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Ramanama Varanane. Om Shri Ramar Pranamastu. Chapter 27 of Ramayana's Ayodhya Kanda, the death of Dasharatha. Apadamahartaram dhataram sarvasampadam lokabhiramam Shriramam bhuyo bhuyo namamyaham. Day dawning, the Vandis and Magadhis came to the palace of the king, and as was the custom, they stood at the doorway and began to sing the praises of the king and to rouse him from his sleep. They sang in tunes befitting the morning and the rise of the sun, and the music was pleasing to the ear. Women from inside the apartments brought water and other necessary articles for the king's morning ablutions. They were outside the chambers where the king was and stood waiting for the king to wake up. The women who were around him woke up from their sleep and they tried to wake up their lord. When he would not get up, even then the women did not realize that the king was dead. The unfortunate king Dasharatha had died during the middle of the night and no one knew about it. Suddenly, by the lack of movement in his limbs and by the general posture of the sleeping king, they guessed what had happened. It was not sleep, and they trembled with fear and shock at the calamity. Neither Kausalya nor Sumitra had woken up yet. The women in the palace knew now that the king had died sometime during the night and that the queens did not know it yet. Their hearts went out to them and a wail rose from their throats, a wail fraught with anguish since they had lost their master, their lord, their king. The sound roused the sleeping queens, and it did not take them long to realize that they had lost everything. They fell on the ground and wept tears of sorrow, and it was not possible for them to realize that their beloved husband was lost to them forever. Dasharatha, who had been such a glorious king, such a just ruler, such a noble soul, such a famed warrior, now lay dead, and it was tragic since Rama's banishment was the cause of his death. For 5 nights the king had lived after Rama had left Ayodhya. On the 6th night he could not bear the pain any longer and had died quietly. He had waited for Sumantra, perhaps to tell him about Rama. When he realized that Rama had gone, that he would not come back for many a long year to come, the noble heart cracked and his breath left his body without anyone knowing, like water leaking silently from a cracked pot. He had been a friend of Indra, the lord of the heavens, and when he was ruling, the earth was like heaven. The people loved him as though he were their father, and such a king had come to his tragic end because of the ambition of one woman. He was the king whom Lord Narayana chose as the one worthy to be his father, and grieving for his son, the unfortunate died of a broken heart and condemned by the world for his unjust act. He was dead and he looked like a fire which had died down, like the ocean which had dried up, like the sun devoid of his brilliance. Kausalya took his head and placed it on her lap. She wept with an abandon which was painful to watch. She had lost Rama, and now her lord was dead, and she repeated that she had nothing left to live for, and that she would ascend the funeral fire with the king. With great difficulty, the other women in the palace took her away and comforted her with empty words, words which meant nothing at all. Soon the city learned the terrible truth that their king was dead. Ministers hurried to the palace, and the people were now crowding the doorway of the palace and the streets. One calamity following another was something they could not take, and there was a shocked silence. People did not know what was to happen, and so they stood, all of them, outside the palace, waiting for an indication of what would take place. Blessed as he was with 4 sons, yet the king's death occurred when not one of them was by his side. The courtiers with Vashishta conferred and decided that Bharata should be sent for and that the king's body should be preserved in oil. The painful day came to an end and night set in. The city, which had been mourning the absence of Rama, now found this sorrow to be unbearable. They had loved their king, and everyone talked only about Kaikeyi and her cruelty, which had caused all this unhappiness to all of them. No one slept, and all through the night could be heard the sobs and wails, and so the night passed. Everyone woke up to another day, and it seemed to the wise men of the court that panic would set in unless someone took the initiative and did something. There assembled in the council hall all the wise men who had been advisers to the king, and they were led by Vashishta, the preceptor. And they said, "The king died because of the terrible unhappiness caused by the separation from his beloved son Rama. And the night was to us a terrible night, lost as we are without a father. The palace is empty. Rama has gone, and with him went Lakshmana. Bharata is in Keya with his brother Shatrughna. The kingdom will be orphaned unless we take some decision. A kingless country is vulnerable, and there should be no aggression by enemy kings when we are in this plight. As for the people, there will be no control over them, and so very soon Dharma will disappear, and that will indeed be a sad state of affairs. There must be someone to rule the country. The king's son will have to be crowned as early as possible. We depend on your wisdom, great sage, to do the needful and save the country from destruction." Vashishta addressed the ministers and the rishis who had assembled there, and he said, "Bharata has been living Raja Griha, and we will dispatch messengers to Kekeya to fetch him as early as possible. There is no cause for us to be alarmed unnecessarily." Vashishta called Siddhartha, Vijaya, Ashoka, and Nandana and said, "I will tell you what should be done. You must shed this grief first and get interested in action. Take the fastest horses in the stable and go to the city of Rajagriha in Kekeya. You must meet Bharata and repeat this, my message to him. Your preceptor sends you his blessings and wishes you well. Since there is some work which you have to perform at once, return to Ayodhya immediately. You should not tell him either about the banishment of Rama or about the end of the king. Carry with you the usual silks and gems which one king should take when he greets another king." Very soon the messengers were on their way. They travelled northwards, crossing a river by name Malini. They passed Hastina, where they crossed the river Ganga and turned westwards. Panchala was soon left behind, and they came to the river Ikshumati. They travelled fast, and after a long and strenuous journey, they reached Girivraja. They did not tarry there, but proceeded from there, and that very night they reached the city by name Rajagriha. This city was the capital of Kekeya, and the young sons of Bharata had been spending some time with the old king Ashwapati and his son Yudhajat. Jai Shri Ram. Shri Rama Rama Rameti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Ramanama Varanane. Chapter 28 of Ramayana's Ayodhya Kanda. Bharata has bad dreams. Om Shri Ramaya Ramabhadraya Ramachandraya Vedase Raghunataya Nathaya Sitaya Pataye Namaha. On the night when the messengers reached Rajagriha, the prince Bharata had bad dreams. The dream was early in the morning, just before sunrise, and he knew that such dreams are said to come true. He was greatly worried, and his face was not cheerful and smiling as was usual with him. His companions tried to cheer him with light words, and they tried to engage him in pleasing sports. But he would not be comforted. His mind was filled with strange misgivings, and one of the young men who was very close to him asked him, "Bharata, tell me what bothers you so much that you are not able to share any fun with us? If you talk about it, perhaps you can lessen your worry." Bharata said, "I will tell you. Last night I dreamed of my father, and the horror of the dream is still haunting me. My father, the king, was dressed in soiled clothes, and his hair was flying in the breeze. I saw him fall from a mountain peak into a pit filled with dirt. I saw him drink oil with his palms cupped together. I saw his body smeared with oil, and he was drowned in oil. I also dreamed that the sea was dried up, that the moon had fallen on the ground. I saw darkness all around me, and I saw an elephant with his tusk broken. My father was sitting on a seat made of iron, and his clothes were black. He was wearing a garland made of crimson flowers, and red sandalwood paste was smeared over his arms. He was riding in a cart drawn by donkeys, and it was going fast towards the south. This was the dreadful nightmare which is still vivid in my mind, and try as I might, I am not able to shed this terror which seems to envelop me. I fear some calamity. It is not possible for the king or Rama, or for that matter, Lakshmana, to have come to grief. I have been told that if in a dream a man is seen riding in a cart pulled by donkeys, very soon smoke will plump skywards from his funeral fire. I am afraid, my friend. My throat is dry and a strange restlessness is making me feel ill. I do not know what I should fear. My voice seems to be choked and my eyes seem to have lost their lustre. I am not able to find the reason for it, but it seems to me I dislike myself suddenly. I am suffering from the dread of the unknown, and this dread is painful. The messengers from Ayodhya had arrived late in the night, and they were at the outskirts of the city. Early in the morning, they entered the gateway of the palace, riding on their tired horses. They were welcomed by the old king and his son. They paid their respects to them, and they approached the young prince Bharata, who was with Shatrugna. They saluted him and repeated the message of their guru Vashishta and added, "These silks and gems have been sent for your uncle. Please give them to him, and these gold pieces. They are to be accepted by the king and his son. This is a gift from Ayodhya." Bharata took them with him and offered them to his grandfather and his uncle. They accepted them with smiles of pleasure. Bharata asked the messengers, "I hope my beloved and revered father is well and happy. I hope Rama and my brother Lakshmana are well and happy too. Is my saintly mother Kausalya without any ill health? Wise Sumitra, the mother of Lakshmana, is well too, I hope. Has my willful mother Kaikeyi sent any message for me?" The messengers were extremely careful in answering the questions of Bharata. "They are all well, young prince. Goddess Lakshmi, born of lotus, is waiting for you with open arms. Do not have any worry. Please make haste and ask your chariot to be ready. You are needed in Ayodhya." Still suffering from the uneasiness following his dream, the prince went to his grandfather and told him about the summons from Ayodhya. He said, "I do not know why I have been sent for, but it is my guru's command and I must obey it. I will come again to see you whenever you want me and send for me." The old man was disappointed that the departure of his grandson was so abrupt, and he said, "Fortunate is my daughter to have such a noble son like you. Convey my blessings to her and to your father. Convey my regards and respects to your guru, the great Vashishta, and also my blessings to your brothers." Accompanied by the many gifts from his grandfather and his uncle, Bharata left for Ayodhya. The gifts were made many and rare, but Bharata's mind was elsewhere. He could not even notice the excellent horses and elephants and the soft silks which had been given to him and to Shatrugna. His thoughts were already in Ayodhya. His dream during the night and the arrival of the messengers early in the morning with their vague message from his guru had unnerved Bharata. He took leave of his uncle and his grandfather. Bharata and Shatrugna took their places in the chariot, and the journey began. Out of the immense gateway of the palace of the Kaikeyas, the princes entered the royal path in their chariot on their way to Ayodhya. Jai Shri Ram. श्रीराम राम रामेति रमे रामे मनोरमे सहस्रनाम तत्तुल्यं राम नाम वरानने। ओम श्रीरामार्पणमस्तु।